Hi, my name is Molly McAleese, and my video presentation is for ALEC 414. I will be discussing why Queen Elizabeth is not the perfect example of how women should lead in the 21st century. Elizabeth Tudor ascended the English throne in 1558 during a period of intense religious war in Europe. Her 40-year reign, like that of her father Henry, was consumed by religious and dynastic problems. The Tudor family came to the throne through civil war, the War of Roses, which ended in 1485. The first Tudor monarch devoted his reign to destroying all vestiges of political opposition and to consolidating royal finances. Like his father, Henry was thoroughly committed to consolidating Tudor power over lingering forces of opposition in England. The central issue for the new ruling house was, as for all royal families, to ensure a smooth, legitimate succession. Henry needed heirs, and in the tenuous circumstances to confronting his fledgling house, he needed strong males. No law forbade the rule of a woman in England, but neither was there a firm precedent for a ruling queen. Unless Henry acquired a male heir, the Tudor dynasty was certain to be challenged upon his death. When having set aside his Spanish wife, Henry formally married to Anne Boleyn in January 1533. In September 1533, Anne gave birth to a daughter, Elizabeth. Queen Anne managed to produce only one child, Elizabeth. Henry's ardor quickly cooled. Relations between the king and queen became strained, and in late spring 1536, Anne was tried for adultery, convicted, and executed. Henry promptly married Jane Seymour. Although the new queen died in childbirth, the product of her suffering, the long-awaited male heir, Edward, survived. Henry sired no legitimate children. At his death, the law governing succession dictated that the crown pass to Henry's only son, Edward, a boy not yet 10. If Edward were to produce no heirs, the throne would pass to Mary, daughter of Catherine. Were Mary to be without heir, Anne Boleyn's child Elizabeth would assume the throne. Neither Edward nor Mary nor Elizabeth produced heirs. Edward, the child king, reigned 5 more years before dying of tuberculosis. Mary Tudor's brief reign, from 1553 to 1558, was her demise. Popular fear that England might become a province of Catholic Spain gave rise to revolt. Having thrown in her lot with Spain, Mary suffered military defeats at the hands of Spain's principal enemy, France. And as riots and plots against Queen multiplied in England, the country's despised sovereignty painfully succumbed to cancer. Elizabeth, Henry's sole surviving child, followed Mary to the throne at age 25. Elizabeth was cautious, subtle, and intensely practical. Although her country, like others in Europe, was divided between Protestants and Catholics, Elizabeth was determined to preserve domestic peace while maintaining the independence of the Church of England. International rivalry in the 16th century Europe was dynastic as well as religious, and the Catholic powers recalling the marital history of Henry denied the legitimacy of Elizabeth's birth and thereby her legitimacy of her as Queen of England. The dangers of besetting Elizabeth were legion. At stake was her life, not just the throne. The Tudor succession was at stake. Elizabeth was the sole surviving Tudor. If Elizabeth could not remarry, her family line would cease. The succession might be contested. England might succumb to internal division and foreign invasion. This problem was a perpetual source of anguish for members of Parliament. These were the issues that bedeviled Queen Elizabeth. Religious rivalries in England set aflame by the Protestant Reformation. The second was international rivalries occasioned by religious differences, particularly the savage struggle between Catholic Spain and Elizabeth's near neighbor, the United Netherlands. The third was the desire of Mary, Queen of Scots, a Catholic favorite of the French and Spanish monarchs, to displace Elizabeth as legitimate queen. The fourth was the problem of succession, a problem involving the need for Elizabeth to pursue royal marriage and produce a royal heir. In the waning years of her reign, Elizabeth granted numerous commercial monopolies to court favorites. These ill-conceived monopolies aroused several criticism among commercial interests in the city of London, England's leading port, and by 1601 the House of Commons was in a state of uproar. Elizabeth backed off and withdrew the monopolies and offered a powerful, emotional address to Parliament and to the troops of Tilbury. Queen Elizabeth died childless and unwed in 1603. In her speech to the troops of Tilbury, she says, "I know I have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king, and a king of England too." In Queen Elizabeth's speech to the troops of Tilbury, she addressed the very reason why she wasn't a successful leader in that time period. In today's 21st century, I think it's important to also take note that starting off a speech understanding the gender prejudices that are at stake is reckless. Queen Elizabeth had the opportunity to build a new reputation that wasn't centered on male dominance and leadership. Because her role was based on esteem and success, the odds were already against her. Many found her ruling to be unstable because of her neglect to the fact that she didn't reproduce a male heir. In the 21st century, I have found through Northhouse's book titled Leadership, gender roles and prejudice are still very present. Northhouse explained that the glass ceiling effect established an agenda for women to fail because they are given boundaries and borders with their leadership roles and positions. This can be attributed even in today's society towards Queen Elizabeth. Before taking throne, there were stigmas towards her established position and whether or not she would ever remarry and produce a male heir to continue the legacy. Northhouse also established Understanding the Labyrinth, in which this figure appears to illustrate the gender roles that are directly proportional to success from female leaders. The leadership labyrinth has 3 circles stemming from the circle that directly influences the motivations and conflicts that occur in this model. One prominent set of explanations for the labyrinth is that women have less human capital investment in education, training, and work experience than men. Because Queen Elizabeth assumed the position of the death of her father, the public at the time were already looking forward to an heir taking the throne once she decided to remarry. Because Queen Elizabeth never remarried and was unwed, the amount of respect and investment that should have been reciprocal at the time was squashed. Queen Elizabeth spent most of her reign establishing credibility and validating her role as a woman in charge, instead of investing in education for her role as Queen of England. In the same scheme as human capital, Northhouse comments saying that women receive far less encouragement and are usually not included in key networks. Queen Elizabeth was consistently at odds with the Parliament and had to establish credibility when she never received encouragement. Part of this area of concern can be directly attributed to the fact that she was a woman in charge. Although this goes against my moral beliefs and values, I am keenly aware that even in today's 21st century, Queen Elizabeth would also be neglected from encouragement if the main task of her life were to reproduce an heir to rule England. Northhouse also states that gender differences were a large counterpart in today's society. Thus, women were less effective to the extent that the leader role was masculinized. In addition, women were seen as less effective than men, where when they supervised a higher proportion of male subordinates, or when a greater proportion of male raters assessed the leader's performance. In reference to Northhouse's gender differences study, it was apparent that during Queen Elizabeth's reign, she consistently had to prove herself as being a strong woman, surrounded by subordinate men. This caused direct issues to reign as Queen of England at that time, and I have no doubt that even today this area would be of issue. Reaching elite leadership positions is not done in a vacuum, as stated in Northhouse. People must negotiate with others to assess the right positions, experiences, opportunities, resources, and assistance in both the professional and domestic spheres. Not only are women less likely to negotiate than men are, the negotiations needed to ascend the leadership hierarchy often are unstructured, ambiguous, and rife with gender triggers, exactly the type of situation that particularly disadvantages women. Queen Elizabeth created an unstable hierarchy because society was constantly awaiting her ruling to end with a male heir to take the throne. The issue of opportunity attributed to her success is a direct result of the gender differences at stake at that time in society and would be even in today's 21st century. In sum, substantial empirical evidence reveals that gender stereotypes can significantly alter the perception and evaluation of female leaders and directly affect women in or aspiring leadership roles. Because of the awareness of prejudices towards Queen Elizabeth ruling, this directly affected her leadership style and stained her relationship with others and created strife in Parliament. In closing, many of the impotence women face in the leadership domain stem from the incongruity between the female gender role and the leadership role. Women face a double standard in the leadership role. They must come across as extremely competent, but also as appropriately feminine, a set of standards that men are not held to. Because of the leadership gap that still stands and the empirical research taken from Northhouse's book, I do not believe Queen Elizabeth would be a successful woman leader, even in today's 21st century. Thank you very much.